limited to Linux only. For example, the program we're going to be using in this article is available for Windows as well. We're going to be using the Gimp, which is the open source equivalent to Adobe Photoshop. It's pretty much the same thing except without the $700 or $800 price tag. So go to gimp.org, and if you're using Windows, you can click download right here. If you are using Linux, you can actually click your use your package manager to acquire the Gimp. And if you click download on the main page, it'll show you how to do it depending on the distro of Linux you're using. Anyway, a Gimp is a multi-platform image manipulation program. Gimp actually stands for the GNU Image Manipulation Program, and it's something I get a lot of use out of. In this video, we're not going to be covering this is geared for beginners to computers, beginners to graphics manipulation, so we're not going to be going into any depth about anything. I'm just going to go over the basic tools, how to use them, and the basic principles of photo editing. Now, unfortunately, I've already got mine set up and customized, so I'm not exactly sure how to set it back to default. I'm not a graphics expert at all. I'm alright at it, but let's see real quick if I can't figure out how to reset everything to defaults. And I don't. Alright, well anyway, when you open the Gimp initially, you have two different windows. You'll have a window for your tools here. These little things right here are your tools. You use them to manipulate the image. And you have a window for your dialogues, such as your your paintbrush, I believe, is part of the tools dialog. But anyway, you'll have one for layers and your paths, maybe even for your brushes and your channels. As you can see, you can arrange them in any way you want. And I believe when you first open the Gimp, you'll have something like this. You'll have a dialog that there we go. You'll have a dialog, two separate dialogues open up along with the main image window. Now this is a new thing with the Gimp. Before, when the Gimp opened, you actually didn't have an image window. You just had your tool dialogue. So when you opened an image, you would have your image window there, and the menu bar was actually part of the toolbox. This is the most recent version of the Gimp, and I guess they've changed it around. I don't care for it because the toolbox always stays on top of the image window. You can't, as you can see, you can't get the image window on top of the toolbox. That drives me insane, especially if you're using a laptop, because your screen size is a lot more limited. But if you're using Linux, then if worse comes to worse, if you're working with a large image, what you can do is, let me see which desktop I'm on. You can actually take your toolbox and flip it to the next desktop over and work on one desktop with just your image, and then come back to the other desktop, flip back and forth to use your tools. Now what I usually do is merge my dialog boxes. Each of these things are considered dialogues. Coming from a programmer's perspective, you might call them windows for a regular user, but I merge my windows into one so it's easier to manage. And to do that, you just grab a tab or something and bring it over here, and just keep doing the same thing. And depending on where you lay the tab, it'll go before or after currently selected tab. And I try to merge them into, it's kind of tricky to figure out where to grab sometimes, but usually if you grab where the name of the dialogue is, that's pretty much what you want. That's not what I wanted. There we go. And the order I try to keep it in is that's not where I wanted that either. There. I try to keep it. The first three tabs are the most oftenly used for me. So your first three tabs should be layers, paintbrush, and brushes or layers. And this is it says paintbrush because that's the default tool, but depending on what you click on, it'll say something different. But this is your options for whatever tool you've selected. So every time you select a tool, this preferences for your tools icon, the contents will change to reflect the options of the currently selected tool. And like I said, tool options, layers, and brushes are the first three I always have because they're the most often used. You don't have to have them in that particular order, but you'll want them towards the beginning. And then the rest of them are your patterns, gradients, channels, undo history, and paths. Actually, paths we can move before channels and undo history. Anyway, you'll wind up using some more than others, and as you get more experienced, you'll wind up changing this around to suit your own preferences. But another thing that I want to point out is shortcuts. It's very important to get that set up too. I've already got mine set up, so I might forget a couple to tell you. I believe with Linux, the default shortcuts for tools is slightly different from Windows. Like, for example, R should be the rectangle tool. Yeah, and so you've got regular keys on your keyboard that you don't need to hit modifiers with. For example, you just hit them by themselves. You don't have to hit Shift or Alternate or Control before hitting them, and they'll trigger tool selections. And then you've got key combinations, meaning a key with a modifier key, such as Control, Shift, or Alternate, that will do an action for you. And depending on your experience and your needs, those actions can vary greatly. Or your keyboard shortcuts will vary greatly. Now, for the beginner, I suggest the shortcuts I normally use, and that's because I normally use them. I get a lot of work done a little bit faster. The few that I'm going to have you set up, if you go to, let me show you how to do that again. Go to Edit in the image window, unless you're using an older version of Gimp and your menu's over here on the toolbox. And either way, you click Edit, and then go down to keyboard shortcuts. And then over here in the keyboard shortcut menu, go over and find one called Image. And then expand that by clicking the arrow to open it. After you open Image, go down to Crop to Selection. And as you can, I've got the hiccups all of a sudden. As you can see, when you select Crop to Selection, on the right, you'll see something that says New Accelerator. That means new shortcut. And then that's your chance to hit on your keyboard what you want your shortcut to be. Now, I believe a lot of the shortcuts I set up are already taken by other keys, but you can reassign them to the one you're assigning them to now and erase them from the old one. And for crop to selection, I usually hit Control-Shift-X. That way, when you have a selection in your image and you want the whole image to be cropped to that one selection, you just hit Control-Shift-X. I wind up doing that a lot, and that's why I overwrote the default shortcut and assigned it to crop to selection. The next one would be scale image. I believe that's default Control-R, but go ahead and click on that and set it up as Control-R if it's not. You can go ahead and close the image area and then go down, I think it's two areas to layers, and then open layers and scroll down and look for, there's a couple of them we're going to set in here. Layer to image size is one that's commonly used, especially for me. I click on that and hit Control-L.